So this week on the show, we're going to be chatting with Alex Reese and Matt Ahrens about what's new in the wonderful world of OpenZFS. After that, we're going to be starting a new tutorial series on submitting your first patch. So all the latest BSD news and, of course, answers to your emails coming up on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 77, Noah's L2ARC, recorded February 18th, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
All right, we're glad to have you guys with us this week. We got another exciting episode, and I'm just glad to be here. It's freezing down in my office, so if you see me shivering, it's probably why.
Sorry about that.
It's cold outside. Well, you're used to that, right, Alan? I live in the South, and it's not typical down here.
I have a strong furnace. It's 24 degrees Celsius in here.
Yep.
I have lots of computers to keep me warm.
That is true. I could go sit out in the shed, and it would be plenty warm, but you couldn't hear me then, and that would be the problem. So anyway, this works. Mm-hmm. But hey, we got a lot of cool stuff this week, guys, so let's hop right into it. First up, you guys may have seen this floating around the net already, but we had a cool article talking about revisiting FreeBSD after 20 years.
Yes. So this is a Debian developer who had used FreeBSD back way in the beginning, and then it got into Linux and that whole show. He is now given FreeBSD a try again recently because of all the brouhaha about Debian and all that fun stuff. And so he kind of gives us his thoughts on where it's surpassed Linux, where it's the same, and where it's maybe lagging behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good and pretty fair assessment of the two, and he kind of gives you a real-world first-hand experience. This is what he ran into personally. But he goes through his experience, of course, trying out a modern BSD variant and has all of it, the good, bad, and the ugly. It's not just the straight-up praise this time. But a couple notables. He says he particularly loves ZFS and the badmin tool, finds the FreeBSD implementation to be much more stable than Illumos. Yep. So that's pretty cool.
Well, also ZFS on Linux.
Yeah, on Linux as well. But that is pretty slick. He said on the topic of jails, though, he has a cool summary in here. He said, Linux has tried so hard to get this right and fallen on its face so many times, a person just wants to take pity sometimes. We've had Linux vServer, OpenVZ, LXC, and still none of them match what FreeBSD jails have done for a long time.
Yeah, and I guess even Docker has their own separate thing now instead of LXC. Yeah. And, he particularly mentions that the LXC people, quoting them saying that, you'll never hear an LXC developer claim that LXC is secure.
Yeah. So anyway, the post is quite a good read through. If you've got friends or you yourself are interested and wondering and maybe wanting to check out things on the BSD side of the fence, this is a great article to give somebody or take a look at and kind of get your feet wet here and what to expect. But the post, he goes through some of the plain different aspects, of course, of having a complete operating system versus a distribution. So some of those differences are touched on.
Yeah.
And he does mention some of the things he wasn't really happy about, which is, of course, subpar laptop support. So I'm sure video drivers came in there. Virtualization being a bit behind, and then a bunch of complaints about a package NG and a few other things related to that.
He mentioned just the fact that there's two separate update tools, right? You have FreeBSD update for the base system and package for the packages. And maybe, hopefully someday, BAFT will have finished that support and we'll have package for everything, and that will solve that problem. The other thing you mentioned is that when you use package audit and it tells you, hey, your Xorg package is vulnerable to a known vulnerability, and then you do package upgrade and there's no update because it's not Wednesday yet, and so they haven't compiled a new set. I can see where that's kind of the user's left wondering, well, what am I supposed to do here, right?
All right. I know there's an issue now, and I got to wait 3 days, 5 days, depending on when you find it.
And then he mentioned for setting it up as a desktop, how he found the handbook very handy, but that just things like, copy and paste this block of XML into your config file for Polkit or whatever was just kind of cumbersome. And our package probably could do a better job of setting up some of that stuff by default. But if he was going to, yeah, I was going to say, if he was going to do this on a laptop with the point of making a desktop out of it, or like a workstation type machine, he probably really should have started with PCBSD, and I think that would have eliminated about half of his complaints.
Sure.
And
but hey,
yeah,
he tried it the old-fashioned way, build it up from scratch, which a lot of people like the challenge of doing that. So
and he mentions that, and he says he has a much better understanding of what's happening in most of the things now because of that. But just copy and paste this block of XML into your Polkit config, that you're not learning anything, right?
Sure.
In that particular case, and so on. But and I think was there any other complaint he had that was a big one? I know the two separate updates was a big thing, and he mentions GOM not having a RAID 5 module, but that's what ZFS is for.
Yeah, say we don't.
Yeah,
I haven't messed it at all.
Yeah, exactly. Usually, he's not going to be using RAID 5 in his laptop. And he mentions being able to add an extra disk to a RAID 5 setup. That's that's complicated, and I know even ZFS doesn't have that, but yeah, it's not something you generally should be doing anyway.
Sure.
And he does mention the problem with the file system support, not having a driver to read ext4 in the base system. There is one in packages, I think, but is it Fuse or is it?
I think it's Fuse, yeah.
We specifically mentioned that it used to be better support, but it was pulled out because it was GPL and replaced with a BSD license one that only works on ext2. Although ext3 and 4 are just ext2 with extra features, so usually you can mount them backwards anyway, although I don't think you should write to them when you do that. So
yeah, definitely not.
For the virtualization thing, Beehive is coming along, but also ZenDOM 0 should land probably by the end of this year, and that will obviously catch things up quite a bit.
Yep. Well, he mentions lacking like Dropbox at the moment as well, and I know we've had a ton of requests for that, and once they get iNotify support or something similar to that, I imagine
it definitely
Dropbox
kind of seems like Dropbox could solve that problem if they wanted to. Sure. I know there are some FreeBSD developers that work there.
Well, hey, go bug them. Tell them to make that happen.
Well, I think most of them work as server admins rather than programmers. So the ones I know off the top of my head.
Yep. Okay, but yeah, again, very, very fascinating article. Give it a read. A good, honest discussion of some of the differences and what to look forward to. I like that he points out that it reminds me of how Linux was a while ago, and everything's just kind of straightforward and laid out the way it should be before it got all complicated. And
he did mention ABI stability of how if you reinstall all your packages when you do a major upgrade. It's not really the ABI that changes there. It's the libraries in the base system, right? Like the version of OpenSSL changes, and you can't link against the old one. He updated, I see, the website with my point about the compat packages.
The compat port.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yes, after every major, you should upgrade all your packages because the ones compiled against the newer version of SSL will be better anyway. And so on.
Definitely. Okay, well, next up, we got our first trip report from the OpenBSD hackathon that just happened in Australia. So this is pretty slick.
Yeah, we had kind of a preview of that, interviewing a couple of people before it even started while they were down there. But it's interesting to see what they got up to while they were there.
Yeah, it sounds like they were very productive. So one of the themes of this hackathon in general, though, was SMP, which is, of course, multiprocessing support. And it looks like Martin over there did a bunch of hacking on this in the network stack. So this is good to see progressing. We have links in the show notes. So if you're not familiar with him, he gave a presentation at EuroBSDCon last year titled Taming the OpenBSD Network Stack Dragons. So it seems like this is an area that there's definitely a lot of active work happening on. And he's been teaming up with David Gwen, and they've been working on getting some bits of the network code out of the big lock or giant lock status so they can do some more SMP work. And we're hoping more trip reports will be sent in the coming weeks. And, of course, most of the big code changes that happen there should appear sometime after the 5.7 release testing period.
All right. So they're in kind of a code freeze at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah. So I'm sure you'll see some big drops of that stuff as soon as that code freeze ends, and they can throw their commits in. Anything else you want to comment on that one?
They did quite a bit of work, but it's interesting to see.
Definitely. Okay, well, next up, if you've been following BSD for a while, you've heard, of course, of Unbound by now. So you've done any kind of DNS on any of the BSDs, you've probably noticed there's been a trend recently with a bind being dropped and replaced with unbound. So
right.
in the case,
Back in the day, it made sense that basically every server would be a DNS server, right? Because you would have one, you'd have one server for your organization or whatever, and it should do your DNS and all your other stuff. But most people that are running it now don't need a full recursive name server built into their base system. And the other problem was that bind, I think last time I did the math, was responsible for like over a quarter of every security advisory that FreeBSD has issued in the last 15 years.
Yeah, and that gets annoying.
Yeah. And so moving it to a port mostly just means it can be updated more quickly, right? So if you want bind, it's still there. It's in the ports tree. You can install it. When there's an update, the port gets updated much, much quicker, right? We see the same thing with even OpenSSL.
Usually same day.
Yeah, that can go in. That's a few minutes to get that sorted out and pushed into the thing. Whereas, when it's in the base system, it's more complicated. Part of the change was also newer versions of bind require Python. And that obviously is not part of the FreeBSD based system. And we kind of moved away, right? Back, if you go way back, Perl and Tickle were part of the base system, and they were moved to ports so they could be updated more rapidly. And we'd have the same thing with Python. And so it makes sense that bind moved into the ports tree as well. And so that leaves you with the very basic tools in the base system. And then you can use those if you just need the small requirements, or if you have the need for a bigger server, then you can just install bind from ports.
So this all happened in FreeBSD 10.0 when bind was ripped out, and it looks like it's going to be gone now in OpenBSD 5.7 as well. But both systems include unbound now as the alternative in the base system. But it looks like OpenBSD is even taking this a step further, and they're going to be throwing NSD into the base system as well.
Or I guess they did that in 5.6. They included them in 5.6, but bind was there as well. And then in 5.7, bind will go away. So you have the period of 5.6, which is almost over, to finish upgrading.
Yeah.
Hence, so this guide will
help
you
do
do
your warning.
it.
Get switched over on this.
Yep.
But so instead of course, having one daemon doing everything like bind does, this new setup on OpenBSD is going to allow you to have split servers. You'll have your authoritative name server and then your caching resolver on two separate daemons. So the post here we're talking about is going to take you through the transitional phase of how you would go from a single bind setup on, say, your older OpenBSD install to the newer combination NSD and Unbound. So all in all, this is just a great thing. Everyone wins. Hopefully this means there's less security advisories going out and less annoying patches that you have to apply for bind, especially if you don't even use it. It's just, yeah. So I'm glad to see this happening.
Yeah, and the best part is that the zone file thing is the same, so you don't actually have to worry about that. It's just updating your configuration.
Okay, so next up, Monowall. Now this makes me sad a little bit here, but Monowall has called it quits. So for those who don't know, Monowall is pretty much the original classic BSD firewall distribution. They've been around a long time, but they've finally decided to close up shop. So they've been around forever, running on all sorts of things, embedded devices, booting from a compact flash card, CD, USB drive, or even a floppy disk.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing, is that Monowall was really, really small. It didn't quite have as many features as the newer stuff that came after it. Like pfSense was actually a fork of Monowall. Actually, even FreeNAS originally forked from Monowall, because it had all that kind of the appliance glue and the scripts to build it already there. And so there are quite a few projects that actually spun off out of Monowall. Like I mentioned, FreeNAS, pfSense, Ascosia PBX, which is a Asterisk, phone server system, and obviously OpenSense being derived from pfSense, which is derived from Monowall, and so on. And there's quite a few projects.
There's even the BSD router project out there now, so there's just a lot of options. So I guess they decided they weren't needed in that space anymore, but it still makes me sad to see it go. I really enjoyed it. But so there's a ton of replacements out there. Of course, I mean, if you don't even want to run a precompiled appliance type setup, you can throw FreeBSD or OpenBSD on your box and do it yourself. So we've done featured tutorials on that in the past.
Exactly. Chris wrote a nice one using IPFW, and then we have our OpenBSD router guide with PF, and we've done FreeBSD with PF as well, and then obviously we've covered pfSense and OpenSense as well, and the BSD router project, where you actually interviewed Olivier about that, and it was interesting because he actually was the guy that started FreeNAS back a long time ago. to store some files at his house. But his love was always routers, and so he handed FreeNAS over to the people at IX and went and did what he wanted to do, which was build 10 gigabit routers.
That's right. Well, anyway, again, I said this one makes me a little sad. That was probably the first router I ever set up. That wasn't, an off-the-shelf type thing. It was a mono wall box, and I'm trying to remember now. I think I booted it off a CD, and then I had a small, like 2 gigabyte hard drive or something in the box that I used just for saving the config. That was it, and it just worked.
Yeah, I remember lots of
thinking worked.
Mono wall configurations running off like tiny little compact flash cards and other things like that. It was just a really small, useful firewall.
Yeah, it was just a great way to do it, especially because I think at the time, this would have been when I was a college student. So like one of my summers, I think I stayed off campus. I rented a place and I needed a firewall so I could get on the net and have more than one computer connected and all that.
Yep.
And that was the way I did it. I worked at the computer lab and they were throwing away a bunch of old systems. I think they were like early Pentiums or something. And I was like, oh, I can just throw another NIC in here and boom, there's my firewall. But yeah, sorry to see it go, but yeah, there's a lot of other replacements out there now. So if you guys are in the market for a firewall, definitely take a look at some of the projects that we've mentioned here. You can see the links in the show notes. Okay, now before we go to our interview for the day, of course, we want to mention our first sponsor for the show this week, and we're going to start up with DigitalOcean, and that's going to be digitalocean.com. And you need to go there, get set up with the coupon code FreeBSDNow, which will give you a $10 credit that you can use to spin up a VM for 2 months, one of their lower end VMs. You can run that, try it out.
Half a gig of RAM, 20 gigs of SSD back storage, one virtual CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. Not bad for $5.
No, that's not bad at all. in a variety of locations too, I might add.
It's very easy to use. You're getting a dedicated system where you have root access, right? And their control panel is really easy to use, and they have an API so you can script it or program it and spin up whenever you want or whatever. And they also have hourly billing if you want to get more fancy using the API. Keep one server on all the time to serve your website, and if it gets busy, you can start up a second one, and then when you're not busy anymore, spin it down and so on. And yes, like you've mentioned, they have data centers in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London. So wherever you are, you can get one that's reasonably close to you, or you can get two in two different places and make sure that they're always available.
Yeah, definitely. So again, go to digitalocean.com and get that set up. There's pretty much no reason not to. Now, do you know, is there a time limit on this coupon code, Alan? Or not in any fear of it expiring on us?
There's not a big rush, but you really should try it out because once you do, you'll be like, oh.
Yeah, don't wait until it's too late, guys. Just get it done now, spin it up, and 2 months to start playing with it. That's plenty of time. A couple free weekends, you can mess around, see what you can do.
Yes, that's the best part. If you do the hourly ones, you're only paying for it while you leave it turned on.
And we're joined now by Alex Reese and Matt Ahrens, who are software engineers over at Delphix, who are here to talk to us about OpenZFS. So first of all, good to have you guys with us today. We appreciate you coming on.
Yes.
Thanks for having us.
Great. So I know we've probably asked you this in the past, Aaron, but Alex, we've probably not asked this to you. So first, tell us a little bit about yourselves. How did you guys first get involved with BSD or Solaris or Unix in general, or what led you to this point?
Well, I went to Carnegie Mellon and studied computer science there, and I came pretty much directly out of Carnegie Mellon to work at Delphix. Delphix is based in Illumos, an open source Solaris fork. And so that's how my involvement in Solaris is. I don't have too much background in BSD, aside from I'm actually involved in the computer security community and do capture the flag competitions. And for the longest time, the DEF CON competitions were held on BSD machines. So I've done a little bit of hacking around in BSD, but not very much development.
Cool. Okay. And Matt?
So I actually started my Unix adventures a long time ago on BSDI, which was like a commercial variant of BSD from, I guess this is the early 90s, early 90s, mid 90s.
Yeah.
And then kind of similar to Alex, when I graduated from college, I went straight to Sun Microsystems, where I was introduced to Solaris. Actually, I'll take that back. In school at Brown University, we we use Solaris in the computing labs there. So that's kind of where I got introduced to Solaris, and then went to work at Sun and started working on ZFS with Jeff Bonwick right out of college. So that's kind of my introduction to both BSD and Solaris, and then I guess my introduction or introducing of ZFS.
Yeah. And now you're a FreeBSD committer, right?
Yeah, so just recently I became a FreeBSD committer, and Kirk McKusick is actually my mentor, so that's kind of a pretty cool to have someone who's also has a big background in file systems.
Oh yeah.
To share with that.
Yeah.
It's like the file system dream team. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the main thing we wanted to talk to you guys about today was the new device removal feature of ZFS that you've been working on. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure thing. So first of all, I can go a little bit into the motivation for device removal.
Yes, please.
For us, we sell a software appliance to customers that under the hood uses ZFS, but the customers typically aren't interacting directly with ZFS. And so we don't typically have scenarios like a common system administrator might have where someone accidentally added or configured the pool in the wrong way, which is, I think, one of the more prominent ways device removal can be used. For us, it's typically used where a customer has miscalculated how much storage they want to have associated with their Delphix engine. And so device removal is a way for customers to rebalance how much storage is available to their pools.
Yeah, so the way that our customers use ZFS, they're typically attaching storage over a fiber channel SAN, so like from some big, expensive EMC box that lots of computers can potentially talk to. So because that's a pretty precious resource and also pretty flexible, this is a really great use case for them. Obviously, people who are using ZFS, like in, say, an IX Systems, TrueNAS appliance where the disks are tightly associated with the machine, they wouldn't have that use case. But as Alex alluded to, there's certainly the case of operator error where you accidentally add a device that you intended to be a log device as a main pool device, or accidentally added a mirror or added two devices as individual devices where you meant to add them as a mirror, right. Something like that. Device removal lets you recover from all of those kinds of mistakes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
But so on the Delphix appliance, it's more we allocated this space and we ended up not needing it, so we want to give some of those targets back to the.
Our needs have changed.
Correct.
To the
the customer's needs have changed, and they don't need as much storage on that machine as they thought, and this lets them rebalance that between different computers.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay, well, can you give us an update? I know we've talked about this in the past about a resumable send and receive for ZFS. Is that still in the works?
Yeah, so I actually just finished that work a couple months ago for the Delphix appliance, and we're going to be open sourcing that code when we ship our next release, which will be probably in March. And then we'll be upstreaming that into Illumos, and it'll get into FreeBSD soon thereafter.
Oh, fantastic.
Awesome.
Exciting. See, more stuff to look forward to.
Yes, I've been waiting for that one for a year and some now. Since Matt was explaining how it would work at Asia BSDCon last year, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that kind of gets us to the question, what's the process like for actually getting code from Delphix and then into Illumos and then on to, FreeBSD and Linux and the other targets?
Sure. So a lot of the recent ZFS changes, I would say at least a plurality of them, maybe even a majority of them, have been happening here at Delphix first.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have our own internal development process where we'll write the code. We do a bunch of code reviews in-house. We have a full we go through the ZFS test and use the ZFS test suite, and we have the Z-test binary for doing automated stress testing of ZFS. And then we will ship it internally on our big production server we use a lot internally for managing VMs, and then we'll release it to customers for a while. And so after we release it to customers, by the time we've released it to customers, we've typically done several months of exhaustive testing in-house of the code. And then pretty much after we publish our release, we're pretty proactive about upstreaming our code. So the process from writing code to putting it in Delphix and shipping it to our customers probably takes 3 to 6 months, depending on the feature. And then we'll tend to upstream features within 1 to 2 months after releasing our product to the public. And I think there's a member of the FreeBSD community,
Shinley,
who
over at IX.
Very proactive about pulling things down. So Matt was telling me like something on the order of a week is about how long he takes to pull down commits.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a couple people at FreeBSD working on ZFS, making sure all that features get into the head as quick as possible so we can get them tested and ready for release as well.
Cool. So what's the timetable like, or when are we looking at possibly the OpenZFS common repo?
So at the last OpenZFS Developer Summit, I was pretty proactive about talking to various members of the Linux community and the FreeBSD community about what their needs were for the OpenZFS common repo. And I think the most interesting thing for the FreeBSD community is, after talking to Shin, I don't think there is a very big need to switch to have this OpenZFS common repo from the BSD community's perspective, because it only takes about a week to pull in commits as is. So there's not very much demand or forthcoming of effort from the BSD community. And on the Linux side, they've diverged enough that they have a slightly different idea of what the end state of the OpenZFS common repo is. So currently there's some rough consensus, but not full clarity of what the end state should be for that repo. And there's not a pressing need from many people in the community outside of the Linux community. So we would love to have people step in and start working on everything we agree should be done, like porting the Illumos code to compile on different platforms. But until we have a better idea of what people want or need or what the benefit would be, we don't really see, it's not really making too much progress.
Yeah. And one of the problems is that creating OpenZFS common repo doesn't actually solve any problem on its own. It just enables, it should make it easier to solve problems down the road. So for example, the Linux code base has diverged a little bit from the Illumos and FreeBSD, which are very similar. Creating this common repo would allow us, or make it easier, to bring all three code bases into closer alignment. But creating the repo and getting it to compile on all the platforms, that's just busy work, and it doesn't actually result in any improvement on its own. So it's hard to get people motivated to do something with a very kind of long-term, hopefully this will be beneficial in the far future kind of motivation.
I'd have to do it if there were more pressing need, but it's more fun to work on things like device removal.
Yeah,
sure.
And as an end user, I'm actually more interested in getting features like device removal and resumable send. I guess the other kind of major goal of the common repo maybe was making it easier for changes to come back from FreeBSD and Linux into the core, but there don't seem to be that many features being created on this side anyway. So there's less of a pressing need.
That is a little bit true, but there have been a bunch of bug fixes on both FreeBSD and Linux. So what we've actually kind of transitioned our efforts, at least here at Delphix, from trying to push the OpenZFS common repo to making it easier for other contributors to integrate changes into Illumos. So, for example, by improving, making it easier to test stuff on Illumos, and trying to automate that. And before that's totally automated for other people, we've been trying to be proactive about testing out changes using our infrastructure, because it's pretty easy for us to do that here at Delphix. So, pulling down diffs that people have posted that have been tested already on FreeBSD, and they just kind of need very simple cursory testing on Illumos. We'll pull that over, run it through the test suite, and if everything looks good, then get that integrated pretty quickly.
Right. So you just have some people that are helping to test changes and shepherd them into the repo, and so that it's not up to the person who solved the bug to actually build an Illumos system and do all the extra stuff that's not outside of their area of expertise.
Yeah, agreed. That's right.
That's good. So how have the various other operating system vendors been with contributing and stuff back and with keeping up to date? Like, is Linux catching up, or are they still quite far behind?
Go ahead.
Linux is keeping much closer to up to date than they've been in the past. They're still not as close as BSD because it takes them a little bit longer to merge in changes from Illumos. But they're definitely much closer than they were before. And BSD, my understanding is some people in the FreeBSD community, we've started pulling in, as Matt was alluding to earlier, like we've started testing and pulling in those changes and helping people from the BSD community push upstream.
Cool.
So we've definitely seen a lot more progress there, which is great.
Cool.
Nice. So what's
it's much more up to date than it has been in the past. If you look maybe a year or so ago, it was pretty far behind what FreeBSD and Illumos had, but nowadays, it's on the order of months, which means basically they have all the major features that are on all the other platforms.
Right.
Nice. So what's the review and testing process like for making changes to OpenZFS at the moment?
So the official party line is that on Illumos, everything has to be tested and reviewed, every single commit, because Illumos doesn't have releases. Every commit is expected to be release worthy.
Sure.
In practice, Matt or George or a couple other senior members of the ZFS community will code review almost every change that comes in and expect the ZFS test suite to be run on Illumos and Z-test to be run on whatever platform. Actually, Prakash and I are working to make some of the automated infrastructure that's available internally at Delphix available publicly to make it so that other people can more easily do all this review and testing process.
Cool. So, something kind of like Travis CI or Jenkins or something esque, so where you propose a diff and it actually gets tested against the suite and you get the results?
Yeah, that's what we have internally.
Okay.
So I would love to put some of my Jenkins infrastructure in the cloud so that other people can work.
Cool.
Cool.
So there's a couple other features that have been talked about in the past that we've been waiting for, and we're just wondering if we get status updates on things like a persistent L2ARC. Do you know anybody working on that?
So that work, it's been a while since there have been any updates on that, but we took a look at that last summer, and the code is pretty close to being done. So I think that it wouldn't take a lot of work to finish that up and get it integrated. Here at Delphix right now, we don't use the L2ARC in our product, but it's something that we're looking at. So we've considered doing that, but it hasn't been a priority for us yet. If somebody else in the community is interested, we'd be happy to help code review that, point out the few changes that we think need to be made. But I think that it's pretty close to being done. Mainly just need someone to kind of own it and take that final push to push it across the finish line.
Cool.
One of the other ones was there was some talk about doing a compressed version of the ARC to get more data to fit in the ARC.
Yeah, so our colleague George Wilson is working on that. He's been working on it for quite a while. And he took some time away from that in the last release to work on some more performance improvements in the SPA in terms of block allocation and things like that. But in the release after the one that's coming out in March, we're going to be doing the compressed ARC. So there we expect to see similar space savings as what we see on disk. And so for our customers, they typically see like 2 to 3x compression on their database files. So that means that for every gigabyte of memory that our customers dedicate to the Delphix engine, they get essentially like 2 gigabytes worth of caching. So that's an easy sell for them to put more memory into our appliance, which is using ZFS, and rather than other places.
Doing more with less is always a good thing.
Yeah, I wonder if that will kind of flip the common consensus on its head. Like a lot of when you configure a ZFS to run MySQL or something, normally the general guidance is disable the primary cache and set it to metadata only because you don't want to double cache in the InnoDB buffer cache and on the disk. But if caching it in the ARC means you're going to get the compression and get 2 or 3 times the amount of RAM, maybe you actually want to invert that all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's a great idea. For our customers, they're running the database, Oracle or SQL or whatever, on a different machine. So,
right.
The machine that's running ZFS, it's not competing with any other applications for that memory.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, that last one here is something I put on, actually. We had a user this last week ask about doing send and receives recursive with an exclude list, if that's something you guys would run into. And his use case was he was doing like a full zpool backup of his system, but he wanted to say, well, I don't want that data sent or received. Is that something you guys have run into?
We haven't run into that, mainly because, at Delphix, we're using ZFS. Our application stack is the one controlling ZFS. And so we don't actually use the recursive send feature. We essentially do all that kind of logic, in our application logic. And then we use the fundamental primitives like in libzfs core. So we've been working more on making ZFS easier to control programmatically, like by adding more functionality to libzfs core. That kind of feature, I haven't heard of anyone else ask for it. It wouldn't be that hard to do.
Okay. Well.
But it would just be a matter of, getting it done. So
somebody's got to sit and do it. Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead. Your question.
Let's say. So, you guys working on anything else new and exciting you want to tell us about?
Good. Well, I think the next thing I'm going to be working on is kind of firming up device removal. So currently, the way it works is by constructing a big mapping in memory of where the data on the old device lived and to where it should live elsewhere in the pool. And having to keep this mapping around forever is a little bit cumbersome. And so I'm looking into doing things like reducing the size of it over time with things like garbage collection, or maybe demand paging it in, or other techniques to try to reduce the overhead of device removal and make it even more easier to use.
Another cool thing that we hope to work on soon, or we hope to finish up soon, is something called channel programs. So this is in the same vein as improving the programmatic usability of ZFS. So channel programs will allow both the ZFS command line and programmatic consumers of ZFS, like appliances, to create complicated administrative operations that execute atomically. So, for example, when you run ZFS destroy-r on the command line to destroy a whole bunch of file systems and a whole bunch of snapshots, right now what it does is userland has to iterate over all the file systems and all the snapshots, and then send down individual commands to the kernel saying, delete this file system, now delete this snapshot, now delete this file system. Each of those operations takes kind of a minimum amount of time, and there can be a bunch of weird error handling edge cases because some other process could come in and create new file systems or destroy file systems or rename snapshots while this other process is trying to do these destroys. So when you're using it from the command line as a system administrator, probably there isn't a lot of stuff going on in the background, and if it is, then you can just run your command again. But if you're doing this programmatically, from an appliance, that's not really an option.
Right.
So channel programs will allow, so for example, in the ZFS destroy-r case, the userland process will send down a little program to the kernel that says, please, iterate over each file system and then iterate over each snapshot and destroy all the snapshots and destroy all the file systems. And all of that iteration and destroying will happen atomically. So it'll happen with locks held so that no other operations can come in the meantime and change, do renames or change the state of things. So it'll happen a lot faster, and it removes a lot of error handling edge cases and things that could go wrong.
Nice.
Yeah, I remember one feature that I had asked for before you said would depend on that was the recursive rollback. Currently, when you do a rollback, you can only do it on one data set at a time. So if you want to roll back recursive snapshot across the set of data sets, that would depend on a channel program as well. You'd say iterate over this list of child data sets and do the rollback on all of them as one atomic operation.
Yeah, exactly.
There was another feature I wanted to ask you about, and I can't remember what it is now. Oh, for device removal, do you ever see it expanded to the point where you would actually be able to like remove a whole RAID Z VDEV?
Yeah, so our goal is that you would be able to remove. So let me step back and say that right now, what we've implemented so far, it only works on pools with no additional redundancy. So the pool has to be all plain devices. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But it would be pretty straightforward to extend it to being able to remove any top-level VDEV. So in other words, a whole mirror or a whole RAID Z group.
Right.
Removing a single device from a RAID Z group or adding a single device to a RAID Z group is much, much more complicated.
Right, because that's like restriping, right?
Project.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we'd have to like restripe it or something. But removing a whole RAID Z group is something that device removal could theoretically do. One of the challenges of that is that when we move the data from the device that's being removed to the new devices, because we're doing it in order, in the block order, so in other words, from the beginning of the device to the end of the device, we don't know where any particular block begins and ends. So we just know that like this 178 kilobytes of space is allocated, and we want to copy that to some other device. This has a lot of advantages because we do everything in going through the device in order, which is much faster, and it keeps the mapping very small because we only have to have one entry in the mapping for each contiguously allocated chunk of space. But the disadvantage for RAID Z case is that when we move that, if we have to split that, let's say we have a 1 megabyte contiguously allocated, we may have to split it into several chunks.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know where each block begins and ends, so we don't know which parts of that chunk are parity and which parts of it are data. So it would be very easy to accidentally move two sub-chunks of that allocated space and have them land on another device in a way that the parity ends up all on the same device, for example.
Right.
So then it would actually defeat the redundancy guarantees of RAID Z. So we need just like a little bit of more logic in there to be able to do those allocations and be able to specify the exact alignment that we need to guarantee that that the parity will end up on kind of the same devices as it was originally, the same sub-devices of that RAID Z group as it was originally.
Yeah, I was thinking more you would just move the data, and as you wrote the new data, you just calculate new parity or something.
Yeah, so when you when you normally write data, we just calculate the parity for that given block, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're writing a logical block, so we figure out, this block is 8 sectors, and we're using RAID Z2, so we're going to use 4 sectors of data, and then 2 sectors of parity, and then 4 sectors of data, and then 2 sectors of parity, maybe.
Right.
But because of the way that we are copying the data when we're doing device removal, we don't actually know which sectors are data and which sectors are parity.
Right. It's just a giant chunk of contiguously written space that you're just relocating. And doing it the other way would be really complicated. Your mapping would get huge because you wouldn't be getting nice contiguous chunks. It would be every logical allocation, which would be a lot.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. So if you have a one with like 3 mirrors in it, you can't remove a mirror right now?
So right now, we don't allow that.
Okay.
In our implementation, and the reason for that is kind of different than the RAID Z,
right.
Because there's no parity issues there. It's primarily because we want all the features of ZFS to work correctly with all the other features. So it's kind of unfortunate that what we've done so far doesn't work with mirror in RAID Z, and the reason that we don't let it work with mirrors isn't because the device removal would be wrong, but because we need to make sure that like, let's say, for example, if you have a mirror, if you have a bunch of mirrors in your pool, that means that you are able to sustain one device failing. So if one of those devices in the mirror fails, then when you add a new device, or let's say you have a temporary outage where one of the sides of the mirror fails, and then you continue doing writes, and then you put the device back in. You know, if somebody unplugged the wrong device or something like that, they plug it back in. ZFS is able to figure out just the writes that happened while the device was offline, and then go find that data and copy it over to the other side of the device.
So it is able to do that. I wasn't sure if it was actually able to do that or not.
Yeah, so ZFS can do that. And
like how far can that extend? I was wondering.
It go as long as it can go. There's no limit to how long it can go.
Okay.
So you know, if you remove one side of the mirror, you wait 6 months, then plug it back in. Then ZFS will detect, oh, this device is the same device as was there before. It should have all the same data, and so I need to resilver everything that was written in the past 6 months.
Okay.
Nice.
So the issue is that we want that to be able to continue to work, even if that happens while you're in the middle of a device removal. And because the way that device removal is writing data is a little bit different than normal, it means that the normal mechanism for finding the data that was written during the outage doesn't quite work exactly right. So yet. So that's one of the things that we're going to be working on in the future, so that then we can say that device removal on mirrors does work, and it totally works. Doesn't matter what happens, if devices fail or whatever, everything will continue to work as you expect, even if a device removal was in progress.
Great. So that kind of actually brings up another question that I was wondering about for when you use zpool split. So if you have, say, a configuration where you have a bunch of sets of mirrors, each one has 3 disks in it, and you use zpool split to take one device off each of those mirrors, and it makes a new pool, and you could, physically remove those devices and kind of use them like a tape backup. And if you had, say, 4 sets of those and you rotate, when you eventually get back and plug in disks from 2 months ago or whatever, is it possible for them to be caught up, or because you use zpool split, they're a separate pool and it doesn't work?
I am not 100% sure, but I think that would not work.
Right, because they have a new GUID. Right?
Yeah, when it becomes part of a different pool, it has to change the identity of all of those disks.
Right.
And you could. The reason that you could have theoretically taken that pool and actually done writes to it, in which case it would be impossible to remerge with the first pool.
But I guess if you didn't do zpool split and just removed one device from each mirror and kept it offline for a while and then brought it back, it would be able to just catch up?
That would theoretically work. I haven't tried that, so there's a bunch of kind of corner cases with device pool membership that are pretty tricky. But that's the kind of thing that should be able to work.
Okay.
Cool.
Interesting.
Excellent. Or anything else you guys want to mention?
Yeah.
I've been really kind of enjoying working with the ZFS community the past year or so. I gave my first, just out of college, my first developer talk at the ZFS Developer Summit, and I've been having a lot of fun working here. So thanks for having us and having me.
Yes.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to have you guys with us.
Yes, thank you for taking the time to come talk to us.
Okay, time now for our other sponsor this week, which we're going to be going over to IX Systems, and it looks like we have a cool new guide they've posted on freenas.org, written by Josh Petzel over at IX, talking about what's new with FreeNAS and your hardware design and configuration, some network notes and a conclusion to this previous series they've been working on.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it when they started it last week. They've been doing a series on how to design the hardware for your FreeNAS and what's better. For why you might choose this or that or the other thing. And so in this conclusion, they actually talk about it as a NAS or as an IP SAN with using iSCSI or whatever. So that means that everything happens over the network, and if you're after a lot of performance, you're going to want good switches and server grade network cards. right? If you're building a home media setup, you can just do it over wireless or, your regular cheap Ethernet controllers and so on.
Sure.
But, if you're going to go with your, if you're building an iSCSI SAN to power your virtualization platform or something, you probably want, something like a nice Juniper switch rather than the little D-Link you would have at home.
Yeah. You get what you pay for in that case.
Yeah, and whether it's going to support VLANs, jumbo frames, layer 3 routing and stuff. And they got a nice shot of a server here with 4 onboard gigabit NICs and then 2 more onboard on an external NIC. Yeah, it looks like they have the 4 onboard gigabit NICs and then via the expansion card 2 10 gigabit copper NICs. I have a similar setup in a server I have from them in my basement, actually.
Nice. One of the things they mention here is the latest versions of FreeNAS now do read-write with ZFS on the boot device, so you don't need like a small read-only memory stick or something, but they say a small SSD or something is a great boot device, and you can, of course, mirror it, but they don't recommend you use a massive drive because that's not going to be used for your storage pools. That's purely for the OS itself. So they recommend 8 gigabytes would be a good starting place.
Yeah,
but
they also talk about how many disks you're going to need in order to actually saturate your network. Even just a 3-drive RAID Z pool with regular slow spinning drives can easily break 200 plus megabytes a second, and your gigabit network is going to top out at like 110, 115 probably. So, it doesn't take very many disks to be able to saturate that network. Now, with more IOPS and doing smaller reads, you might get slightly less performance, but, you have to consider not just how many disks you need. I'm going to use all mirrors and get really high performance. But then if your bottleneck's going to be your network, right? So then maybe you're going to need, dual 10 gigabit NICs or something to actually be able to push that data across fast enough.
But anyway, kind of the point of all this, of course, is we're talking about IX Systems here, and the URL for that, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. But if they can write these kind of cool technical articles and tell you everything you need to know about the type of setup you should do for your FreeNAS box, something you're maybe setting up yourself, imagine the experience when you call and get in touch with these guys and have them build you one of these.
Exactly.
Obviously, they know all this stuff off the top of their head. I mean, they're writing a lot of this. So, they will definitely hook you up with the solution you need.
Yeah, that's the big thing there is like in the article, they kind of just came up with the common use cases they could think of or ones they've seen before and say, oh, well, if you're doing this, then you want to do it this way or whatever. Well, the best way to get the right solution for you is talk to them and explain what you want to do, what you need to do, and what your challenges are. And they'll think about it and come up with a solution that will actually solve that problem for you.
Definitely. So, please go ahead and get in touch with these guys. Let them know that we sent you. We would appreciate that. And let them build you anything from the small FreeNAS minis that you can purchase up to these massive systems with, 10 gig additional ports on there as well. So, definitely the way to go. Okay, so let's move into the news roundup, Alan. So we have first up overlaying LANs with OpenBSD's VXLAN.
Exactly.
So this is kind of cool.
So VXLANs is it's like VLANs over UDP. So what it lets you do basically is merge 2 or more LANs that aren't in the same place as if they were one big LAN. So, for example, if you have servers in 2 different data centers, you could use VXLANs to create a tunnel between them and have all the servers appear as if they were on one big LAN. Or you could do something like, if you're a company like us and we have a bunch of servers everywhere, we could have a separate VXLAN for each customer. So, if a customer has VMs in this location and this location, they can have a private LAN between them that looks as if the 2 machines were sitting side by side in the rack, when really they're not even in the same country.
Yeah, that's definitely really slick. So the article we have linked here is going to show you how you can set that up, and it's going to walk you through a little bit of the networking background first. So if you're not quite up to speed on how all this works and some of the technology involved, this is a great way to get your feet wet. And this is really cool because it even opens up a lot of neat possibilities. Imagine back in the days when I did LAN parties, like that, this would have been neat to have around, right? A remote LAN party now, where everyone appears on the same LAN, but of course they could be separated by continents even.
Exactly.
But we also have a link to an Asia BSD con talk that was given about VXLAN. So if you haven't seen this already, go ahead and hit that one up, and there's going to be some other good information there, which will get you up to speed. Okay, next up in the roundup. So this was I saw this earlier in the week, but this is kind of cool. A KDE developer has posted a blog article talking about 2020 being the year of the PCBSD desktop. Which at first I thought, wow, that's a long ways
Yeah.
off, and I was like, oh, that's only 5 years away
I
now.
know this.
Holy crap! It's only 20. It's already 2015.
Yeah.
So,
It's crazy to think
but
about that, eh?
I know, right? But he predicts that PCBSD is going to take off before the year 2020, possibly even overtaking Linux desktop market share,
Oh.
even though it's small at the moment. But
Yeah.
that's a
Like
big
you said, if you
prediction.
looked at what Clang and LLVM were 5 years ago compared to what they are now,
Sure.
a lot can happen in 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. Very rapid change. But some of the points he makes, of course, with PCBSD making a pre-configured FreeBSD desktop a reality, and the new KMS work that's happening in the FreeBSD world, the author is pretty impressed with how far BSD has come as a viable desktop option. And then some of the things he points to, PCBSD specific, are ZFS and the easy-to-use boot environments on the top of the list of things he say that differentiate
Yeah.
the BSD desktop experience from the Linux
I
one.
think that was his biggest point was more, if you look at Linux 5 years ago to now, there's not that much different. They've maybe more tightly integrated with stuff and some polish and so on, but they haven't really invented anything new. Whereas
Sure.
PCBSD has, the life preserver thing where you can pull your machine back from your FreeNAS when you bork it, or, the boot environments, which is just amazing. You're getting this new encrypted ZFS on your thumb drive for your home directory, and,
Yep.
the portability there, and just, Lumina's
Well,
whole
that's
new
one we haven't
desktop
even
thing.
talked about yet.
Right.
But yeah, but he points to our roadmap and
Yeah.
says, "Look at all the new stuff they got going on here that's happening." And yes, I have to kind of detach myself a little bit when I talk about this because that's what I do for my day job.
Yes.
But yeah, like there's a lot of stuff happening here, and we are definitely not standing still and trying to innovate a little bit of what happens on the desktop. But you just mentioned like an encrypted home directory on your thumbstick. That's something we'll be talking about in the next quarterly update. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, he was definitely mentioning boot environments and doing some new things with how updating works, which is something that he's not seeing happen elsewhere in Linux at the moment. But yeah, this was a pretty cool article, and it did get some talk on Slashdot as well. So we have links to that if you want to go read through some of the comments, see what's happening in that part of the world. But
Yeah, he added.
I, for one, hope he's right.
Yes, he added an edit at the bottom. For those of you that didn't catch what he was trying to say, he's not really talking about infrastructural changes like System D versus and Wayland and Plasma 5 and so on, but more about if you take your Ubuntu machine and compare it to a Fedora machine, you can't see that many differences. But when you compare it to PCBSD, if you really look at it, there are that many more features and that many more innovations happening there. And that's more what he was talking about. And, just the differences between the different package managers and stuff. But mostly just, all these different Linux distributions, they all seem to be exactly the same. And PCBSD is actually just different, even though it's still using a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah, we do run a lot of the same stack of open source software. But yeah, under the hood for what actually makes it a desktop, we're trying to innovate and push that ahead as far as we can. So anyway, yeah, go ahead and check out those links, folks. That's an interesting article. And again, I, for one, hope that he's right in that prediction. So, okay, next up, we have a cool article about OpenSSH host key rotation, which we talked a little bit
like
about.
1 or 2 weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, I know. This just happened, but there's already been some other news on that front. So we mentioned that in a previous episode, and we have links to that, but it's already changed a bit since then. DJM over at the OpenBSD project says that almost immediately after they declared mission accomplished, the bug reports started rolling in. So there were some initial complaints from developers about the new options, and then a serious bug they found shortly after publishing. And they went back to the drawing board, refactored some of the new code and API, and added some more regression tests. And most importantly, the bigger bug fix was described as a malicious server. Say host A could advertise the public key of another server, say host B. Then when the client would try and connect back into the host A, instead of answering the connection as its usual self, host A could proxy the connection to host B. Ouch.
Yep.
So this would cause the user to connect to host B when they think they're connecting to host A, which of course is a violation of the authentication that the host key should be providing. So it looks like this is all stuff that they've addressed and fixed. And it shouldn't have caused any issues. This still hasn't even hit in a formal OpenSSH release yet. But hopefully some of these new features will make it out soon.
Yeah, and he explains why that was kind of difficult because calculating things every time would be wasteful and so on. And but yeah, it's this is how most of this stuff happens, right? You come up with a new feature, and then immediately people start poking holes in it, and then you work on it.
They beat it up a little bit, and you find out really quick, like, oh, these are the things that need to be fixed again.
That bit we thought was good enough, not so much, and
definitely
a bunch of other things. They also say the host key proof extension is now committed to OpenBSD's head, and they also added a update host keys equals ask mode, which will allow the user. It'll prompt the user, do you want to update with this thing? So if you're paranoid, you can only let it update keys when you specifically ask for it to do that. And a bunch of other extra checking and tunables that'll make this less of a surprise change to users as well.
Okay, well, next up in the roundup, we have something I just did a couple days ago, I guess, where we're going to try out a Libre SSL on PCBSD. So we are looking at and really wanting to move over to Libre SSL. So last week we mentioned we switched over to OpenNTPD for PCBSD, and so that has made it into our source tree, and we'll have Edge packages shipping with that here shortly, and that'll go in the next quarterly update. But in addition to that, I got a little bolder and decided, hey, let's try Libre SSL to replace OpenSSL as well. So we're working on it. It's rough. There's still a lot of packages that do not build properly from Libre SSL. So at the moment, we're building a set with OpenSSL still, and then we're going to keep trying through the next couple months.
Well, have you switch over when you're building with OpenSSL? Are you using the OpenSSL in base or the one in ports?
Well, we just switched to the one in ports. So we're going to build our next Edge set to using the OpenSSL in ports, and then after that's done, we're going to switch it back to Libre SSL again and bang on it a little more, and hopefully each time we can solve a few more things, till we end up where we don't need to use the OpenSSL from ports either. We can just switch it to Libre SSL.
But yeah,
so go ahead.
I definitely see an advantage to using the OpenSSL from ports, just as far as updating it more quickly and so on.
Yeah, so even that's a change. So we've at least moved that far. For sure, we're going to switch the OpenSSL from ports, but Libre SSL will be the goal in the long run. So there's been a number of patches that we've been pulling out of GitHub and from FreeBSD's bug tracker. There's a bunch of things that still need patching, like Python needs a bunch of fixes, and I think when I ran my build yesterday, curl was another one which wouldn't build properly. So that needs to be patched. That blocks like 3,000 ports.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be fixed. But this is the part where I will say, if you are interested in helping with this, get in touch with us, because we have our own ports tree fork, and we can accept patches there, and we can start testing and doing test runs of things built against Libre SSL versus OpenSSL. So if this is some area you have some personal interest in, get in touch with us on the mailing list, or just send me an email, and we'll figure out a way we can make that happen. But yeah, if you want to be a part of that process, like I'm very eager and ready to make it happen. And as TJ writes in the show notes, you can look forward to me wearing the Keep Calm and Abandon OpenSSL shirt here in the near future. So, right, let's make that happen, folks, so I can honestly wear that shirt. Okay, so before we go into the feedback, of course, we want to mention the other sponsor this week, which is a TarSnap, and the URL for that is tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Do go there, let them know that we sent you, sign up for an account, get in touch with the guys, and definitely try it out. It's so cheap, just like we talked about with DigitalOcean earlier. There's no reason not to try it at this cost. I mean,
I've been using it since January as part of my New Year's resolution to make sure I do better backups, and I've in all of January, I managed to spend 25 cents.
Yeah. Again, at that price, I mean, just even in a test situation, you can put a couple bucks in and never run out of money there.
Exactly. But I'm backing up all of my critical business files, because that only adds up to 500 megabytes of files, and a lot of that is just source code and like SVN metadata that I could have excluded from the backup, but it was just so cheap, it made more sense to just back it all up. And to spend time,
easier to have
than to spend time trying to figure out which things I could exclude safely. Right, it was just safer and easier to just back it all up. And with the nice keys and everything, I have the keys, keep them safe, because I know that if I lose them, not even calling can get my files back. And that's the difference between this and some other backup service is I don't have to trust Colin. I know that it's physically not possible for him to get the files, even if I wanted him to.
Okay. Well, again, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Go get signed up, grab a client for just about anything under the sun. So whatever you're running, even, yes, it could be Linux. You could go ahead and do that and start doing your backups now securely and safely offsite.
Yeah, someone in the chat room loves the precision of Colin using Pico dollars. His current he
Right.
deposited $10 and his current account balance is $9.99.9911455500239
Right.
cents or whatever. Gotta love that.
But yeah, that gives you an idea how little it costs.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so first up in feedback this week, we have Benjamin, who asks about an NTP server. He says, if I was to run a public open NTPD, what would be the best way to lock it down? Based on the latest episode, it sounds like it changes system settings like tick rates and time. Is there a way to run this in a jail and give it a bare minimum permission?
Well, normally when you're running OpenNTPD as the client, then yes, it's changing your tick rate to keep your clock in sync. If you're running it as a server where you're having other people pull their time from you, you're usually having some other time source that you're using to give away. Like like we talked about with their sensor framework to pull the time off of a GPS unit, and then that's the time you're giving away. And so obviously in that case, OpenNTPD isn't changing the time on the GPS. So in general, it already has privilege separation. The code that's actually doing everything is running as an unprivileged user, and you don't really need to do much else. But we did a tutorial on running an NTP server, so you can look at that. Did you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it.
Yeah.
OpenNTPD is not extremely complex, so you just kind of set it up and it goes.
Yeah. Until the latest commit that happened after our interview with Henning, there were only 4 or 5 directives you can possibly put in the config file, so there's not much that you can do wrong.
Definitely. Okay, next up is Mike, who asks about some PCBSD issue. He says, hey guys, and as always, great show, love it. Please talk about ARM more. Well, you got a lot of that today with our interview, which you will hear in an upcoming episode here soon. I think, 2 weeks from now we air that. So yeah, keep listening. But he says, I've been using PCBSD for a long while now. Great times are had, etc. So now that GNOME 3 is working really well and stuff, I hope you can help me with something. Every search seems to fail. My own skills aren't strong enough in the system side configuration of this type of thing. How can I switch to using Emacs, the GUI type, as the default editor to setting GVim as the default? For instance, when I open a .tar.zip package in Archive Manager and then double-click something, it opens the file in Emacs. Yuck. And he said, I'd like to open it instead in GVim or gedit instead. So this is a little tricky here because you say you're a GNOME 3 and it looks like the Archive Manager is what you're clicking to open a file, and then it's associating that as text and opening it with your default.
Right. So where do you define the default text editor association?
It's done by Desktop Manager. So in KDE, I can do it, and there's a way you can go define and say in text for text files open with this. I just Googled it because I'm not a GNOME 3 user, so I'm not sure if they have a handy-dandy utility which will do this for you.
I would assume they do.
Yeah, somebody said, though, if you just right-click Properties, Open With, and then change the set as default, you should be able to do that. So if you have a text file, it's already sitting on your desktop somewhere. You should be able to change it as the default in that way. I know you could go edit some of the Xorg, the X desktop specifications to change application defaults there as well. And that should be under user local share applications, I believe, or no, MIME, excuse me.
Nice.
Yeah. And you can edit MIME types there if you want to do it by hand and if you're brave and all that. Yeah, user local share MIME would be one location where you can poke around in there a little bit and you can find all the different specifications of what applications are default. But yeah, I would just Google GNOME 3 default app or change application
it's
type
not
or
specific to PCBSD at all. So
No.
However GNOME does it is how it gets done.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, possibly if GNOME 3, if the port we have for GNOME 3, again, since I'm not a GNOME 3 guy, if the port we have doesn't have that feature, boot into another desktop environment like KDE and try setting it there. I think the way it saves is kind of generic, so it might work in GNOME 3 when you log into it next time. So you could run that if all else fails and see if that works for you. But get in touch with us. We'd be curious to hear. Maybe we can document that a little better in our handbook for you. Okay, so next up is Brad asking about FreeNAS hard drives. He says, "Hey guys, I have a FreeNAS box with three 3 terabyte RAID Z1. I know, I'm working on it. As soon as I get the drive replaced, I'm going to go RAID Z2 with 4 drives." Actually, I'm in the same boat, Brad. I got my main system, a RAID Z1, three 3 terabyte drives, and I got 2 more of these guys sitting here to switch it over to RAID Z2 when I can this weekend.
Yeah,
So,
I wrote some docs on doing that one. I had a 4-disc Z1, and I upgraded it to a 6-disc Z2, kind of with a long, complicated process of dancing around. Basically, I had just small enough amount of data on the old drives that I took the 2 new drives, installed them, and then replicated my data over to them, and then used the 4 old drives and 2 G0 devices to emulate the 2 missing disks and create the 6-disc RAID Z2, then replicate all the data back, and then swap in the 2 drives that were missing.
that sounds complicated,
Yeah,
Alan.
yeah.
I think I'm just going to do my send and receive and just restore from my
Yes,
FreeNAS
that's definitely
backup.
the easier way. My problem was I didn't have another place to put the files while I was doing that. Anyway,
That
back
is
to the
true.
question.
All right, back to the question. He says, "I will probably go RAID Z2 with 4 drives unless there's a better way to do it. One of the 3 drives seems to be spiraling down the slow path to insanity. Every 30 minutes, I'm getting a message similar to SmartD device, etc. Currently unreadable pending sectors. The number started at 32 and has fluctuated from there up to about 120 up and down. I've run 2 scrubs, which makes the number shrink, and then it'll creep back up, but it hasn't yet gone above 120. Also, I'm occasionally seeing the following, but they tend to go away." And then he has some smart error messages here about failed smart usage, seek error rate, failed smart self-check. You should back up your data now. So yes, big scary warning.
Yes, Smart is definitely detecting the problems. So pending 112 currently pending sectors means there are 112 sectors the hard drive can't read or write to, and it's trying to solve them. But yeah, and then also when the seek error rate goes really high, you're definitely having a problem with that drive, and the self-check has failed, so you definitely should just replace that drive.
He said, "I was talking to some folks on IRC, and they were saying it sounded like a battery. I have one platter. Keep an eye on it, because if that's what it was, I could run for an extended period like this." But he says, "I have."
If
Yeah, I
you
wouldn't
like your
recommend
data, if you don't want your data to just disappear, you really should just replace the drive.
Yeah.
You know,
That's why you have your RAID Z1, so that if you know this is happening, you can replace the disk and before it does fail and another drive starts to fail on you. So anyway, he says, "I have another 3 terabyte drive in my possession. I have 2 questions. First, should I replace it now before it fails?" Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he says. I'm
Definitely
guessing the
what you
answer
should do.
Yes.
It's the lowest risk time to do it, right? If you wait, then it can only get worse. So do it now.
Yep, he says, "Second, I watch this host very closely, and I'm ready to swap out the drive should it fail. After talking to Drew on IRC, she said the proper method is, as stated in the FreeNAS handbook, to swap the drive, is to take the failed drive offline, swap the disk, and then click replace and let it resilver. However, the disk has not failed. And will still show online. The
Right.
pool has
So,
5 point. Oh, go ahead.
You can what's called administratively offline a drive. So you can take any drive in the pool and mark it as offline, which is, if you're going to pull a drive and you know it, it's a nice thing to do. It lets ZFS flush everything and finish. And then, you can just offline the drive and then replace it. And then when it looks at the drive again, it'll be like, oh, that's a different drive. And then you do the replace, and it will copy all the data that was missing back to the drive, and it'll be all good.
Definitely. He says his pool has 5.4 terabytes available, of which I'm using about 1.4 terabytes. He said, "Would it be better, as you discussed in episode 76, to try a zpool replace rather than going through the entire resilver process?" He said he's heard Alan talk about zpool replace before, but would there be a better use case for this method?
So if you have enough SATA ports that you can leave the old drive connected and connect the new drive, a zpool replace, it basically does the resolver with both those disks online, and it lowers the possible problem of one of you have 3 drives, one of them's failing, and if you pull it out and resilver, if one of the other 2 drives has a problem during that time, there's no second copy of the data to recover from. Whereas if you do the replace operation with having all 4 disks connected, then it'll definitely help a lot.
Okay, well, hopefully that goes well for you. But yeah, replace that sooner rather than later. Like Alan said, it's just going to get worse. So let's fix it now while you have the time.
Doing a zpool replace I don't know if the FreeNAS GUI has a system for that.
Well, it's like Drew was talking about in the docs there. It kind of lets you offline it, replace it, and then online it, and it'll do the resoldering.
Yeah, which is different than the
GUI.
online replacement. I don't know if it has support for online replacement, in which case doing it the way in the manual is the supported way, and it's probably best. But the the problem with doing it with like from the command line with zpool replace is you're going to want to partition the new drive the right way so it fits in the FreeNAS way FreeNAS sets up the drives. And so, I provided you some instructions in the email I sent you this morning about this. But basically, if you do gpart backup and back up the partition table of the old disk to the new disk, then it'll have the same partition layout, and then you can do the zpool replace. But, the way the handbook suggests to do it is probably best. But you can do a zpool replace if you'd rather, and if you want to take responsibility for any fallout that happens because you were doing it that way instead of the other way.
Okay, well, that's all the feedback for this week. So now we're going to go into some of the mailing list gold. We have a couple FreeBSD related things this week. So first up, there was some changes made to dev random in current, which if you've been following the mailing list, you've probably seen this week.
So when they came up with a system to have a pluggable system for the random number generator about 4 months ago. And the idea with this one was, we've been using Yarrow for a while, but we eventually want to be able to have Fortuna, the newer random number generator. And so if we have a pluggable system, then we can switch between them, with the sysctl kind of thing. And when that code was brought in, it seems a mistake was made and the initialization code wasn't called at the right time. And so when the system started up, it might not have a very strong seed or very random seed for the number generator, meaning that the numbers coming out of the number generator, especially right after reboot, wouldn't be as good. And specifically, this does not affect if you're reading data from dev random, but does affect if you are using the arc4random function in the kernel or in userland, which is what things like OpenSSL, OpenSSH, and Geli use. And so specifically, if you were running FreeBSD current, which is the development version, this change never affected any of the release versions. It won't be backported into 10.
If you're on 10 dot something,
yeah, if you're on 9 or 10 or whatever, you're fine. Only if you're running 11 in the last 4 months. If you generated any secret keys, you should replace those keys with new ones generated with the after this fix that went in yesterday. So that means, any SSL certificates you did, any SSH host keys you did, and any Geli encrypted hard drives you did, and a bunch of things like that. Anything where you have secret keys, basically. Your GPG keys, anything like that. If they were generated on a machine running the head version of FreeBSD, you want to redo them.
In the last 4 months, so
So there's some changes committed. The very first commit to these changes actually broke ZFS.
Nice.
Because ZFS uses the random number generator to read enough randomness to come up with that globally unique ID for the pool when it boots up. And it wasn't properly initialized yet at that point, or it was because normal case, you always read in the properly aligned chunks, but ZFS only needed a small bit of randomness, and it was causing some problem. But they got a patch for that, and it's all sorted as well.
Okay. Well, very cool. Next up, it looks like, I'm not sure if this is specific to just Dragonfly or if this happened on FreeBSD as well, but kind of a public service announcement. They found a bug with package ng, specifically where it could remove itself during an upgrade, and you end up with no package on your system. Oops-a-daisy. So they had a post here showing how you can fix it by cding the user and running make package bootstrap, and it'll download and fetch the version of package that it needs again and rebuild it. And then the newer version shouldn't have this issue. So did you know if this was specific just to Dragonfly, Alan, or is this...
The fix definitely is, because there's no makefile in the root of /USR in FreeBSD.
Yeah, I was going to say that won't help me here. But yeah, I don't know if this was specific to package itself or just something about what it was doing on Dragonfly. But anyway, I don't see a reply to it here.
Yeah,
so we'll see if this
don't
shows
know
up elsewhere.
If that... I knew that package on FreeBSD is quite a couple versions ahead of this already, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
But yeah, that's an interesting one where package will delete itself. I wonder if it does. Do you still have package static? I don't think this bug is specific
yeah.
to. It would be specific to Dragonfly, because in FreeBSD you actually have two binaries, right? You have the bootstrap that's part of the base system, and then you have the actual package binary that gets installed. If you uninstall package, then the bootstrap binary shows up again. Like it's always there, but it's later in the search path, so it'll just reinstall package again. This was be specific to Dragonfly. I'm guessing because they instead of building a bootstrap binary into base, they just kind of kept it separate.
Sure. Okay. Well, as we wrap up the show here, folks, of course, we want to mention, please send in your questions, comments, or show ideas, topics, or stories you want to have mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. We would appreciate that. And of course, if you write an article or a blog post about BSD, or just you're surfing around, you find one you like, be sure to send it our way in case we haven't seen it yet or have missed it, and we can try and include it in a future episode.
Yes.
Also, if you're going to be in or around the Southern California area, there's going to be at least 2 BSD-related talks at Scale 13 this year, as well as an OpenBSD booth and a FreeBSD booth. And there's going to be some BSD certification exams happening as well.
Yes.
So
I know
want to make it
David Maxwell will be there talking about pipe cut. I think there's some NetBSD people will be there. Michael Dexter's there. I forget what he's talking about. Beehive probably. I forget. But the list of talks is on their website there, but they have there's quite a few BSD things going on there. So if you happen to be in Southern California, you should definitely check out the Southern California Linux Expo, even though it's not specific to Linux.
Yep, it's at the Hilton at the Los Angeles airport for those who are local to the area. And also, special thanks to our anonymous listener for writing most of this week's tutorial. We'll be doing ones for PCBSD soon using Git, and FreeBSD with SVN sometime in the near future as well. So special thanks for doing that. And we look forward to having you guys back with us same time next week.
And stay tuned for the tutorial.
So you're reading through the OpenBSD man pages or website, and what do you know? You stumble upon a typo. Well, here's a perfect opportunity to learn how to create patches to send and get your first credit in the source tree. So OpenBSD uses CVS for version control and the CVS tool to create patches. It can be found in the default installation of OpenBSD as well as NetBSD. It's also available in the FreeBSD ports tree. So the first thing you need to identify is which tree you need to check out, and there's 4 in total for OpenBSD. We have SRC, which is source code, of course, including man pages and default config files. We have the ports tree, which is all the third-party software as well as the related infrastructure. Xenokara, which is Xorg and associated utilities, and then www, which is the OpenBSD web pages. So to keep things organized, we're going to have to check it out into a subdirectory, and you can take it away at this point, Alan.
So the first step to creating a patch is to check out the source code. So to do that, we'll make a directory and go into it. And then instead of checking out the entire CVS tree, I'm just going to check out a small subtree. So that the example will go by a little quicker. So in this case, we're checking out the source code for VI, and we'll make a little change in there and do like you like. So now if we go into there, source user.bin VI, and then into the common directory, and then if we decide to edit, say options.h, and here's the source code. And we see all of the stuff going on in here. Now, if we just decide to make a change, see like, for example, right in here, see that there's a bunch of different settings and options. And then with the one right here, we can say, decide that we want to change this. Right, so we'll just erase the old value and put in something new. And then we can do that for another line as well. So now we've made some changes to our source code. Then if we just do CVS diff and redirect that to a file, now, if we look at that file, we can see it's just a diff. It tells us what file we edited, where that file lives, the old version. You can see that file was last modified in January of 2006. And that was our new modified version. And the difference is that we took out those 2 lines and added these 2 lines, changing the text of the comments there. And now you've created a patch. All you have to do is now attach that patch along with a useful message about what the changes are, and then send it into the appropriate OpenBSD mailing list. If it's a change to the source code of the man pages, that mailing list is tech@openbsd.org, and make sure your patch is inline rather than an attachment. If it's a diff to the website, that also goes to tech as an inline patch. If it's for ports, you can do it goes to ports@openbsd.org as either an inline or as an attachment, especially if you have binary files rather than just text changes. And if it's a diff for the Xorg or Xenocera repository, that goes to tech@ or to x11@openbsd.org, again as an inline attachment. And then the other OpenBSD developers will see that, and they'll take a look at it. And if they think it's a useful change, they'll commit that, and it'll become part of OpenBSD, and you'll get to see your name in the commit message. And if it's really interesting, you might even get to hear about it on the show. And then now you're famous. So that's all it really takes to make a patch. You find what's wrong, you check out the source code, you make the change, generate a diff, and send it in. And then if you do that enough to the point where you get annoying, they might just punish you with the ability to commit directly. And that's how you become a committer. Well, thank you for watching the tutorial, and we'll see you next week.